Diana, I wanted to ask, in the last 2 years since the genocide in Gaza started, have there been any meaningful legal prosecutions at all in Israel of soldiers who are accused of war crimes or extrajudicial killings or torture or anything like that? The reason I ask is because of because what you're describing is exactly the type of conduct that the U.S. would criticize in Syria or Russia and other countries. Was happening in Israel, very well documented, and your testimony and video evidence and so forth. But as you said, there's been no legal scrutiny at all. Is that the case?
Yes, none. The cases in which there has been scrutiny against Israeli soldiers are few and far between. Most of them involve things like stealing money. When they raid Palestinian homes, and there's documentation. And there's been one very famous case of an Israeli soldier who shot a Palestinian as he was on the ground in Hebron. He shot him in the head and several times, killing him. And the only reason that this particular soldier ended up facing prosecution was because that execution was caught on camera through an Israeli human rights organization, actually through a Palestinian who works for an Israeli human rights organization. The interesting thing about that man, his name is Elor Azaria, was that the sentence that he ended up getting was much lighter than a Palestinian. She was a teenager, Ahed Tamimi, who slapped an Israeli soldier. She ended up going to prison for a lot longer than Elor Azaria, who ended up shooting a Palestinian who was motionless on the ground. He shot him in the head. Elor Azaria goes to prison for a lot less. And when he comes out of prison, he's declared a hero. Plus, there were a number of members of Knesset who said that he shouldn't have gone to prison in the first place, and that it was a travesty that he had gone to prison. And there were protests over the fact that he ended up going to prison.
Diana, I wanted to ask about Gaza. Just before the broadcast, we were talking about, the acute genocide has stopped with the ceasefire, the scorched earth bombings, scores of Palestinians being killed every day. But the genocide is continuing. This is really a continuation of it, with everyday restrictions on food, fuel, medicine. The attacks are continuing, the destruction's continuing. But it's been a moment where also we're trying to take stock of what happened over the last 2 years, or trying to, at least, which is a very difficult task. And the way things are being talked about after the so-called peace deal was signed in Sharm el-Sheikh, it seems that we're talking now about peace and reconstruction, and there's no talk of accountability for what has happened over the past 2 years, and also no real talk about the so-called next phase. Israel has almost never, I believe, gone past the first phase of a deal. And the exchange of captives is almost complete. The world has focused on the remains of Israeli captives, while tens of thousands of Palestinians are under the rubble as well. And as you mentioned, there are hundreds of Palestinian bodies being held by Israel, some of them for decades. And they're being returned unidentified, tortured, signs of field execution. But yeah, what we were talking about before, how are you trying to take stock of what's happened, and what do you think is coming next for Gaza?
Sharif, this has been just the enormity of it all is starting to hit me. It's not starting to, it's hitting me. And I think it's hitting every person who has a conscience. And the minute that this Israeli plan that is being branded as a Trump plan, the minute that it was unveiled, I commented and said that what Israel is trying to do is they're trying to normalize genocide. And they have, and they're getting away with it. And you're right, there is no talk of accountability. And that was, I think, the whole point of this plan, was that as we saw that world opinion had changed, and it has changed, but as we were seeing that there were measures to hold Israel accountable, everything from pushes for arms embargoes to we saw that people were taking matters into their own hands, whether it was the global Samud flotilla to the other flotillas, to the boycott movement that was picking up. We saw that these measures of accountability were beginning to take shape. And there was court case after court case after court case, that suddenly we get this plan and we see the world go back to, world powers that is, go back to, normal. And we can now suddenly forget Gaza. And we can just go back to business as usual, so that the new normal is genocide, that Israel can continue to kill. It just can't be in those same large numbers, but they can continue to kill, they can continue to maim, they continue to starve, and the world doesn't have to worry about it any longer. So what's the future hold for Gaza? I really don't know. And this is why I think that there has to be a continued push for accountability, but I just don't see it happening with this Trump plan. And that, I think, was the whole point of it. So the accountability has to come from us through the continued push for BDS, through the continued push for accountability in other fora. Because without that, left to its own devices, Israel is going to continue to do what Israel wants to do, which is to try to eliminate us. I mean, the whole Zionist program is a program of genocide, of ethnic cleansing, and of elimination. And that's the only way that they created Israel in the first place. This is the only way that they're going to continue to get rid of Palestinians 77 years later. So this is why the push for accountability is so important at this time. But the enormity is definitely hitting everybody, especially as I was saying to you just a few minutes before, is that when you think back to when the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has nothing humanitarian about it, when you think about how when the GHF was formed and how 2,500 Palestinians that we know of were gunned down as they were just trying to get food. So somebody thought that it's okay to gun down 2,500 starving Palestinians. And then suddenly it's gone. This is the level of accountability that we need to go after. These are the types of organizations and corporations that need to be gone after. Otherwise, again, it's just the normalization of genocide.